Yes, sir. I actually just started a Zoom meeting with a class, and it doesn't really start for another 10 minutes, but normally in the upper left-hand corner of the screen where I'm looking at my own live image, it would say recording. Instead, there's an icon that looks like a green padlock that's got an E on it, encrypted. My concern is, will that keep students from coming into the meeting? And of course, is it being recorded? Sure. 279-120-6792. That's great. I appreciate it, Tyler. I'm just used to seeing a little icon that actually says recording. So the image, I am not. I am. That's what I thought. Well, actually, the encryption icon disappeared when you chimed in, when you joined the meeting. Yeah. Well, I've got the bar that says mute, stop video, manage participants, yada, yada. Yeah, I'm doing something that's sort of idiotic, and I'm fixing it. I've been using a Wacom Artist tablet as a second screen. And the reason I say I'm fixing it, I've got a new Surface that's supposed to come in this Thursday. I don't know if that made any sense. Yeah, I know. That's why I called you. I'll tell you what I am seeing. In the ID bar, ID number, there's a little cloud to the right, and it has a blinking red light in it. Okay, new symbolism. All right, sir. So there shouldn't be anything that blocks students from joining. And as you say, it is recording. So I should get the MP4 file tomorrow, probably. Okay, I appreciate it. No, sir, you took all the stress away. All right, Tyler, thank you very much. You have a great day. Bye-bye. All right, guys, I had cool. Shannon, good evening.
Hey there, how are you?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
I want to say, now I've got 35 of you guys, so I don't keep track of everything, but I want to say you tripped up. I say this before anybody joins. Did you trip up a little on the first quiz?
I stressed out because I did not realize that it was going to actually be a question from the actual case study. So when I first opened it up, it said, if company so-and-so wants to closely match company so-and-so, what should be there, whatever. And I'm going, well, where are the figures? There's no data in this problem. So I started stressing, going, what? And I started to type, there's no data in here. How am I supposed to work this? And so then all of a sudden a little light bulb went off, and I'm stressed at that time, but a little light bulb, I said, wait a minute, that may be some of the actual companies in the case. So I opened up my spreadsheet, but I was all stressed out.
Go. Well, my whole idea is to force students to get familiar with the case so then they can handle the quiz. And like I said, I'll tweak one or two things, but other data you still have to pull from the quiz. But that's
I wish I had written the question down, because now I go back and look and I go, wait a minute, which figures did he even ask for at this point? I was but yeah, I mean, I knew the thing inside and out. I mean, I hope my spreadsheet, the case study, actually showed that. But when I got on the quiz, like I said, man, there wasn't any data in the problem. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to work here?
You get a drop quiz, that's your mulligan.
Yeah, I've already got.
Is that a phrase you're familiar with?
I already have a spreadsheet template I built tonight with my grades in there. So, and I got little formulas in there for also. Anyway, I'll be all right. I hope. I think
you will.
It counts so little. Plus, we get to drop one. So, and Michael told me that he was going to have to use this one for his drop, because he said he submitted his. When he submitted it, he said he didn't notice it at the time, but he came back later, and that it said mail was undeliverable because he put your email address.
Actually,
Mike Cudd.
Have you talked to him since then?
No, I talked to him first thing this morning, but I haven't talked to him the rest of the day.
Oh, well, you did talk this morning. I think he's okay. I think it came in.
Okay, well, he told me, I just typed in, he said, just because that's the way everybody else's address is, and he typed in mcud at mc.edu, didn't think anything about it, and he said it was supposed to just be Cudd, and I said, oh, really? I said, well, I didn't catch that, but I always go to type it in and then let autocomplete finish it up, so.
Well, how are you doing now that you got your feet wet in the class?
I'm doing okay. I looked at the this week's case study, and it looks a little more involved than last week's, but I haven't watched the lecture videos. So, and one of your lecture videos last week, it's the
risk.
I think the next to the last one on risk.
Yeah.
It repeats a whole 2 or 3 minutes in there. You watch it and you're going along with the slides, and then all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, haven't we already done this? And it repeats a whole.
Oh, really?
2 or 3 minutes, yeah, about 2 or 3 minutes in there is duplicated.
That shouldn't have happened.
And I know
I made all these videos when the 15th edition of the book was out. So I made it out of the 15th edition. The 16th, they didn't change anything except the risk chapter, and all they did with it was 2 things. They changed the chapter number from, I think, 8 to 6, and then they dropped part of the material.
Well, that must have been all the slides there were some of them that the slides were skipped. And I was like, well,
I'm sorry.
We're not going over these anyway. And then I didn't catch until later that you said to ignore the first however many minutes, and I thought, oh well, I guess it hurt me to have watched it. So,
I think you'll find that for all the other chapters throughout the rest of the course, the videos and the hard copy regular PowerPoints match up perfectly.
And the figures, the numbers have changed on some of the problems in the lectures.
Yeah, I changed up some of the examples.
Which is no big deal.
I
I mean, yeah, I mean,
I didn't think that would throw you.
No, it's just like, but at first you go, wait a second, am I on the right one? So you get to let you go, okay, well, they must have just changed up
Yeah, that's my bad.
In the additions. So, well, it's not your bad. I mean, they changed the numbers on it. So.
I thought about trying to give you guys a warning. That was primarily the risk chapter. And I thought about trying to give you a warning at night side it'd be easier to get forgiveness and permission or whatever the saying is.
Well, one thing that would have made me not stress out is if on that quiz, if it would have said something or started off like, from your case study, company, whatever, if they want, and then so you would know. But I'm sitting here reading this question. I'm going, wait a minute. There's no data in here. How am I supposed to work this?
There's too much information. Oh well, yeah. I could have just put that phrase. Hey Sarah, good evening. Hey Sarah. Another student came in, but I don't think her microphone is on. There she is. Sarah, can you
Hi,
hear
Dr.
me?
Cudd. Yes,
Hey.
how are you? Do you guys
How
have a
you
good
doing?
weekend? I'm good.
Man, good.
Well, terrible for a Monday. It's been a busy one.
Well, most things were closed today. I know the campus was closed.
Yeah,
No,
I had a full work day, sadly.
bless your heart. Well,
And I was on call all last week, and we had all sorts of issues. I had to get up at one morning about 3:45. And by the time I got in here and sat down at my desk and was trying to get my eyes open and log into the network, my boss was sending me a text. I need you to look at this ASAP. I said, I'm already looking at it. Well, I logged on, and then I saw what the problem was. And I said, well, by the time I finish this and fix this, it's going to be time to take a shower and then go on into the office. So I'll just go ahead. And so I did that. And I was in the office at 5 o'clock. And,
Shannon, years ago, I had a dean who would get into all kinds of stuff and count on me to bail him out. I would literally get a call from him at 1 a.m. to come over and fix some type of statistical analysis or program. Believe me, I know what it means to be on call, even though there was no such official thing.
Well, I love my job. That's just the only. We just hired 2 new people. Right now, there's 4 of us in rotation. And as soon as we get these 2 new people trained, it'll be once every 6 weeks, which won't be as bad. But
Jeff, good evening.
Good evening.
Shannon, I'm not into pictures or anything, but I really like the one behind you on the wall.
I've had that thing for. My son had this was his game room, and now he's not so much into the games. In fact, he just decided he wanted to live with his mom. So I've had custody of him, and he's about to turn 16. But anyway, I've had all kinds of issues with him. Anyway, I turned this back into my office, and it's not much of an office at this point, but that picture I've had for, God, probably 30 years or more.
My wife is in something called Study Club. And they've done presentations of first ladies, famous cities. Right now it's smart people. She's got Einstein. And she walked into, I don't know, Repeat Street or some type of second time around store and found a picture of him that's like 3 feet by 4 feet and shows him riding a bicycle, grinning ear to ear. It is really cool. And I've told her I'm claiming that as soon as she gives her presentation. You may see it on my wall behind me for later meetings.
Well, are the YouTube, I mean, the Zoom link for each week, the one in this week's on Moodle did not work. And I was about to send you an email. And I said, well, let me go look back through my emails. And I used the one from last week and it worked. So are we to use the same one every week?
Say that again.
The link for this Zoom meeting,
Yeah.
there is no link in this week's, in the folder.
Every recording will have a separate link.
Okay, well, I used the one you sent last week because there is not one on Moodle.
You know what I'm doing? I'm using my Zoom ID for the meetings. So yeah, it's the same one each week.
Okay.
But I still need to mail you the links for it to work, I believe. I know too little about it to explain it or determine whether or not it'll work, but you're here.
I'm here. And was there a PowerPoint thing for this meeting, or are we just going over the PowerPoint lecture files?
I think I sent you a special limited set of slides, did I not?
You probably did, and I just overlooked it.
Sarah, Crystal, Brian, Lori, Jeff, did you guys?
You did last week for sure, but I'm not sure that you did this week for tonight's, I mean.
Yeah, I don't see anything in my box this week.
I tell you what we'll do, we'll wing it, and then I'll send you a copy after the meeting's over.
Okay.
If I knew how to do it right now without crashing and burning the meeting, I would, but I feel like I'm walking on eggshells.
No, I'm good.
I hope to be working with a totally different set of equipment next week. I ordered a Microsoft Surface that's where I won't be dealing with dual screen, much less the Wacom Artist tablet that one Zoom technician told me. He basically said I was really asking for trouble trying to use that. He explained it. I don't understand it, but it operates. It's not designed to work with a computer. It's designed for you to draw things and then save the files. That's it. So, and I didn't know that. But we've winged it so far. If I can get by tonight. Guys, it's after 7. You want to start? You're like the fearsome 6 tonight. Do you see, well, yeah.
Dr. Cudd, I do see that you sent another set of slides in a separate email. I can't get them up while we're on the middle of the meeting, so.
Well, I think what I was thinking, you might print out a hard copy and then just take notes on them. But either way, whatever works. All right, guys, I'll start with this. I'm keeping this brief. I'm purposely trying to kind of give you a brief preview of what you're looking at for the coming week with these slides that this short version I generate for our Zoom meetings. We're looking at 2 chapters, 2 topics this coming week: cost of capital, and then analysis of financial statements. And your case really deals with analysis of financial statements. Toward the end of this, I'll give you a pretty good idea of what you'll be doing with your case. Can you guys see a PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Cool. It says cost of capital. By definition, capital refers to long-term funding. And companies engage in maturity matching just like you do. If you buy a car, you don't take out a 30-year loan, you take out a 5-year loan. If you buy a house, you take out a 30-year loan, not a 5-year loan. You match the maturity of your funding to the life of the asset. And the term cost really refers to opportunity costs. Short version. A company is thinking about, let's say, building a factory. They're going to get some money from the sale of bonds, creditors. They'll get some money from the stockholders, although it will typically be retained earnings they have built up, but it belongs to the stockholders. And what we're after with the cost of capital is we're trying to figure out what rate of return do we need to earn on that bundle of money to satisfy both the creditors and the stockholders. Now, one of my students deemed this whack, and it stuck. It stands for weighted average cost of capital. That's another name, a longer name for cost of capital. And it is simply a weighted average. WD would be the weight for debt. If you're going to get 40% of the total funds from debt, WD would be 40%. R sub I is the after-tax interest rate on the debt. You'll see this in a minute. WP would be the portion of your funds that come from preferred stock, although not many companies use that. Not me. Can you hear that? I am taking drugs while I go through rehab with my feet. It does funny things, but are you hearing some funny noise in the background?
Yes.
Okay, good. Anyway, this is a first. Okay.
I think everyone just needs to mute their audio.
Yeah. All right. Two new people, or Sarah somebody, not you, Sarah Waters, but another Sarah. I've got several Sarahs. Good biblical name. No big surprise. The two new people are Sarah and Caitlin. Sarah and Caitlin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Okay. All right, so we keep going. Now, most companies really just use two sources of funding for capital. Long-term debt, which is the sale of bonds. If you'll notice in this diagram, we've got notes payable, but that's not long-term funding. So that's not normally a source of capital. And here's the part where the public just doesn't have a clue. They think every time a company builds a factory, they have a big stock issue. They don't. About 2/3 of funding for expansion among Fortune 500 companies comes from retained profits. That's equity. It belongs to the shareholders, but the company didn't pay it all out. They hung on to it. This is why. So our two primary sources of funding, come on. Oh, that's slow. Oh, no. Well, anyway, will be debt and retained earnings. And that's what you'll find is true for the, well, wait, you don't have a case on this. But that's what you'll find is true for a lot of your problems. out of the chapter. All right, let's begin with a simple example of cost of capital. You've got a company. They're going to raise some of their money from the sale of bonds and some of the money from retained profit. So the first step is to figure out what rate of return do we need to earn on the money we get from the sale of bonds to cover that cost. In this particular, I just made up the name, Ultra Corporation. They've consulted with a lead investment banker and have been told that if they want to sell bonds, they should be 20-year bonds, have a 10% annual coupon. They're facing a 40% marginal tax rate. And by the way, it's the marginal tax rate that you use in decision making. It's not the average tax rate, it's the tax rate that applies to additional dollars of income. That would be the same thing with you. If you decided to moonlight as a computer technician, it's the tax rate that would apply to the additional income that would matter to you. And finally, the investment bankers are going to help sell these bonds are going to charge a flotation fee of $20 per bond. So we're going to look at the bonds, and this ought to start to look familiar to you after this last case. If they sell the bonds, what rate of return do they need to earn on the money? They're going to get $9.80 per bond. They're going to sell them face value. Uh-oh. Can you hear that? I'm getting a feedback.
Yeah, it looks like it's coming through Sarah.
Sir?
Looks like it was feeding back through Sarah.
Now, Brian, are you sure you're not just picking on her? How did
No,
you?
it looks like everybody else is muted.
Okay. Wow. I would have never caught that. All right. They're going to sell the bonds for $1,000. Corporations want to design their bonds where they sell at face value. It's like a loss of face if they don't. So they consulted with the investment bankers. They told them, if you want these to sell at face value, set the coupon rate at 10%. That's where the $100 comes from. Coupon rate times 1,000. Make them 20-year bonds. And you would have to earn on the $9.80 per bond you receive a 10.2% rate of return to cover the payments on the bonds.
In this example, why is the payment in future value negative?
I expressed the cash flows from the standpoint of
Oh, I get what you mean now. You're losing the money.
If you were the bond investor, the signs would all be reversed.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Now, here's the good thing about debt funding. It's about the only good tax break that corporations get, but the interest expense on debt is tax deductible. So what they'll have to actually earn after taxes is less than 10.2%. The shortcut formula, and you can use this for purposes of exams, is just to take what's called the before tax cost of debt, Thank you. Now I feel like I'm picking on her. Take the before tax cost of debt, multiply it by 1 minus your marginal tax rate, And that gives you what's known as the after-tax cost of debt, which your author uses, for which your author uses the symbol R sub I. For those of you with an accounting background, the interest expense is tax deductible, but so is the bond discount, only you can't expense it. You have to amortize it over the life of the bond. In English, what I just said is that this before tax cost, every bit of it is tax deductible. So we can multiply it by 1 minus the tax rate. That tells us what we need to earn after taxes on the money we Ultra gets from selling bonds. Now, the other source of funding they'll use is equity. And like most companies, our company will have built up some retained earnings. This is not the retained earnings account on the balance sheet. This is simply cash they have built up from prior profits. And when you get to stock valuation later, you'll find out there's more than one model to estimate the stockholders' required rate of return on their equity. But the one you're familiar with that you were exposed to in the risk chapter was the CAPM. So let's assume the average stock is expected to generate a return of 12%. The S&P 500 is a broad index of, well, 500 different stocks. So if today you hear on the news the S&P 500 went up 0.7%, what that really means is the average stock went up 0.7%. We use treasuries as our proxy for the risk-free rate, the return on treasury securities. We use the return on some broad index, generally the S&P 500, as our proxy for return on the market on an average stock. So, running this through the CAPM, it looks like our stockholders would want a 14% rate of return on the company's equity that they choose to invest in a project. Remember that retained earnings are part of equity just like the stock share. And the philosophy is whatever rate of return the stockholders are expecting on their stock, that's what they would want the company to earn for the retained profits that belong to them. So we've got debt on which we would need to earn 6.1% after taxes. We've got equity on which we would need to earn 14%. I don't multiply that by 1 minus the tax rate because payments to shareholders are not tax deductible. There's no tax savings or tax break there. Now let's assume the company will finance its projects in the long run using 37% debt and 63% equity. I know those are not nice round numbers, but once you look in the full slides, you'll see where that came from. So now we crank out our weighted average. By the way, let me correct that. I slipped up. Not the dividend model. The company believes the CAPM is the best fit to its shareholders. So what's the WACC for Ultra? We're only using two sources, debt and equity. The weight for debt is 37%. The weight for equity is the other 63%. From our conversations with our lead investment banker, we have figured out we would need to earn 6.1% after taxes to cover the cost of debt. Well, boy, did I mess up. May I change up a number or two on you on the fly so it makes sense? What should this be? I was using 14, was I not? I didn't do this as cleanly as I had hoped, but now I'm getting 11.1%. Sorry about that. I went to sleep at the wheel. So our weighted average cost of capital is 11.1%. That's the minimum rate of return. Well, actually, it's a hurdle rate. We need to exceed that rate of return on a project to justify investing in it. So when we look at different projects, if they're average risk, if their expected rate of return is more than 11.1, we accept it. If it's less than that, it's not high enough, so we turn it down. But that's why I call it a hurdle rate. A project proposal's expected return has to beat this to justify accepting the project. Now we're looking at 3 projects, A, B, and C with different costs. We're assuming they're all average risk. When you look at the slides, the fuller set of slides, you'll see there are ways we adjust for risk. Right now, we're keeping it simple. We're assuming all 3 projects are average risk. A's expected rate of return is 10%. Is that good enough? Remember, our WACC, after I corrected my mistake, was 11.1%. That's the minimum. Is A good enough?
No.
So we would not accept A. What about B?
Yes.
Yep. We would accept B. Wow. We would accept C. Both B and C have an expected rate of return that exceeds the minimum we require. So our total capital budget would be 500 mil. Any questions on that? That's my short and sweet version, preview of the cost of capital and what that chapter is about. It's odd, but actually there are 3 chapters that go together as a package, but I just couldn't present them all in one night. But this chapter, which is cost of capital, and chapters 10 and 11. So it's really 9, 10, and 11 are actually a package deal. Those chapters collectively show you the approach that companies use to decide whether or not to invest in really big long-term projects. Nissan went through this first to figure out whether or not the factory up in, where's the Nissan factory, guys?
Canton.
Yeah, Canton. Thank you. Forgot to. Canton. They went through this process first to decide whether or not it was a good idea. Obviously, the expected return exceeded their cost of capital. All right. Any questions on what I've covered for the cost of capital? And after the semester's over, when you give your comments, I really am interested in this whole idea of a preview on Monday nights is a good idea. There's no way I can conduct a full lecture. It would take 4 or 5 hours. But this sort of gives you a sense of what you're getting into. This is some little brainchild I came up with. All right. The other chapter, which your case is about, is actually financial statement analysis. There's a lot of people call it ratio analysis.
Would you recommend we go through chapter 9 before chapter 3 when studying it?
Oh, look, they've got a whole lot of things. Well, your authors feel like you ought to cover them 9, 10, and 11. I honestly think it ought to be 9, 11, and 10. You'll see why later when we get into 10 and 11, but they're substance to all kinds of arguments about the sequencing of the chapters.
So do you recommend us read chapter 3 and then chapter 9, or chapter 9 then chapter 3 in the order that you're covering them tonight?
Believe it or not, they're unrelated. Your case is about chapter 3. 9 is a totally separate subject. So it doesn't matter.
Okay.
One is not a prerequisite to the other. Sometimes in a book, you may find that chapter 7 occurs before 8, and you really need to know what's in 7 to understand chapter 8. Not the case with the 2 chapters we're looking at this week.
Gotcha.
Now, I've got some financial slides that we're going to use just for this little example. And these are the ones out of your full set of slides. Balance sheets, income statements. When you go to a doctor, there's that feedback.
Sarah, I don't know if you can hear us, but will you look at the bottom left of your screen? There should be a little microphone. Could you just turn it off?
She did. Cool. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry about that. We're not trying to pick on you. We're getting some weird feedback through that microphone. Okay. You go to a doctor. They take your pulse, your temperature, your blood pressure. Each one is giving hints of your general health. We do the same with financial ratio analysis. Different groups of ratios measure unique attributes of the company, or they attempt to. For example, The first group of ratios you'll look at are called liquidity ratios, and they measure the ability of the company to pay short-term debts. Another group of ratios are called leverage or debt management ratios, and they largely look at the risk of the company by looking at how much debt the company carries and its ability to make the payments on the debt. So different groups of ratios. What I'm doing tonight is picking on two specific ratios because they bear so prominently in your upcoming case. One ratio is known as days sales outstanding. And it's found by taking receivables times 365 over sales. And for our particular company, that works out to be 45.6 days. What is that? That's the average amount of time it takes for our company to collect from its credit customers. Would we like that to be shorter? Sure. Money has time value. We'd like to collect more quickly. Companies strive to shorten this. And let me give you one other little aside, and I don't remember if it's in the slides or not, but I'm going with the ratios the way they're structured in our book. So if we're looking for days sales outstanding for 2020, we take receivables for 2020 times 365 divided by sales for 2020. But other sources, probably your principles of accounting class, if you have a financial ratio that mixes an income statement item like sales with a balance sheet item. Now, what I'm about to show you, you don't need to know for purposes of the test, the case, but just so you will. Another source to find this would average the balance sheet item for the 2 years. So basically, take receivables for 2020, receivables for 2019, and take the simple average. Then multiply that by 365 and divide by sales for 2020. Dun & Bradstreet, which is one source, the major source of industry averages, tends to crank out the ratios the way our author does. They don't bother to average the balance sheet items. Standard & Poor and almost all other sources crank these ratios out like you were taught in accounting, where you average the balance sheet item if you have a ratio with a balance sheet item like receivables and an income statement item like sales. Now, what I have just shown you, come on, this thing is so slow. There we go, got it. Guys, I don't know what's going on, but my system's trying to lock up. Sorry, I'm waiting for it to respond. There we go. What I just showed you, you don't need to know. You can purge. It won't show up on exams. It won't show up on case quizzes. but just so you know. All right. The other ratio we're going to look at that's central to the case is inventory turnover. We define it as cost of goods sold divided by inventories, which for our company is 4.2. Each year, they average selling off their inventories 4.2 times. Or another way to look at this ratio, you can express it in days. Day sales in inventory is 365 divided by inventory turnover. In this case, 86.3 days. How would you interpret that? It takes the company 86.3 days on average to sell an item in inventory. Just as you would like your day sales outstanding to be quicker, you would also like the day sales in inventory to be shorter. You don't want items to sit in inventory forever. You want to move them quickly. Now, let's say we've got our company, and right now, they've got a day sales outstanding of 45.6 days and an inventory turnover of 4.2. So first we focus on day sales outstanding. They average taking over 45 days to collect. What if, and we actually cover this in a later chapter, but what if they could knock that down to 30 days? Maybe that's the industry average. And we'd like to, through better management of our receivables, collect faster. Normally, if you cut your day sales outstanding down, you either change to shorter terms or you get tougher with late accounts. Normally, that'll cost you a lot of sales. But if your day sales outstanding has been way above average, all you're doing now is coming in line with your competition. If the company were to do this, they would have to frame all of this for their customers, give them advance notice, explain to them. We're simply coming in line with our competitors. You can't get better terms from our competitors. We're simply matching them now. If they could do this, it would generate additional cash. How much? This is that same balance sheet, but in a little more condensed form. I've collapsed short-term investments and inventories into other current assets. Now, what if I'm backing up slightly to show you a statement. What if we can do this without affecting sales? Sales will be affected, but it could be a negligible extent. But it's good to see what could happen. What if we could cut our day sales outstanding from 45 plus days to 30 without affecting sales? How much cash would that generate? One of your formulas is day sales outstanding. But if you rearrange it, and solve for receivables, you find receivables or sales per day times day sales outstanding. So if we could cut our days sales outstanding to 30 days without affecting sales, that would knock our receivables down to 247 mil. The original level was 375 mil. That would be a reduction in receivables of 128 mil. Think of receivables like an asset. What if we were looking at inventories and we could knock inventories down, reduce our inventories? What happens? Are we buying more inventories, or are we selling off some of the inventories? We're selling off some of the inventories. So which way is the cash going? If we reduce our investment in an asset, whether it's inventories or receivables, the cash is coming in. The change in the asset, how much it drops, is how much additional cash we would generate. So if we could do something to knock receivables down by 128 million, cash would increase by 128 million. Or using the T accounts on a balance sheet, cash would go up 128 million, receivables would go down. If we don't need that extra cash for operations, what could we do with it?
Reinvest it into the company.
Whatever we want. Yeah, you're right. You're right. We could reinvest it. We could use it for more expansion. We could use it to pay off some of the debt. The key point is, this would be additional cash that would benefit the company. Now, after the dust settles, the revised balance sheet, before we decide what we do with the cash, would look like this. Cash would have gone up, receivables down. And the amount that receivables went down is how much cash would go up. Now, yeah, and I addressed that. Now, their inventory turnover is presently 4.2. Do we want inventory turnover to be higher or lower?
Higher.
Higher. We want to sell off our inventory more quickly. And that avoids a whole trove of expenses. You know, all the carrying costs with inventory, storage, insurance, obsolescence, yada, yada. We would like to increase our inventory turnover, sell it off more quickly. So, what if, through techniques, by the way, we will look at in a later chapter, what if we could drive the inventory turnover up to 6? From 4.2 up to 6. And we could do it without affecting cost of goods sold. When you look at this ratio, you need to think of cost of goods sold as a measure of volume. It really is sales expressed at cost. Now, right now, regrouping the balance sheet the way it originally was, I now have collapsed receivables and short-term investments together just to make it a little briefer, simpler. Right now, we have inventories of 615, cash of 10. If we could pull this off, The inventory turnover ratio rearranged could be expressed as cost of goods sold divided by inventory. Simple algebra. If we could push that inventory turnover up to 6, that would knock our inventory level down to 433. From its original level of 615, or a reduction in inventory of almost 182 million. If you reduce your inventory by 182 million, which way is the cash going? Is it coming in or going out?
In.
It's coming in. You're selling off more of the inventory. Ever how much the inventory would drop, that's how much cash would go up. And what can we do with it? Whatever we want. What you're facing with your case is a company that got into trouble. They went to sleep at the wheel. Sales didn't meet projections, yet they just kept producing like mad. So their inventories built up to excessive levels. To try to help move the inventories, they gave their customers longer terms, which pushed up days sales outstanding, which pushed up their investment in receivables. So basically, what they were doing is something like this. If you like T accounts, they overproduced, so their inventories built up. Their knee-jerk reaction was to give customers longer to pay, hoping that would stimulate sales, help them sell off some of the inventories. It did not. So receivables went up. And if this T account represents a balance sheet, if you have assets that go up, they've got to be financed by some source. And this company financed its increase in receivables and inventories with debt. So now they're having all kinds of problems. They're having a cash flow. First of all, they're a lot riskier. Their debt ratio's gone way up. They're having a cash flow problem. They have foreseen they can't make the payments on the debt when it's due. So basically, your company is going to the bank where they've borrowed all of this short-term money. The bank technically could call in the loans. The company is in default. They've let their current ratio and quick ratio, they've let certain financial ratios get out of whack to the point that they violate the loan contract. So the bank could call in the loan. But no bank wants to force a company into bankruptcy for this reason. Well, for several. But one is, the average return for creditors when a company is liquidated is they get back 11 cents on the dollar. It's not good at all. And of course, it would worsen the bank's reputation as being supportive of their clients. So what is happening in your case is the management of our company is going to the bank and saying, please, please, please give us another year. And during that year, what we'll do, we'll reduce our day sales outstanding to generate some funds. We'll increase our inventory turnover by cutting down on our inventory. They'll cut back on production. Now, that doesn't come without pain. If they cut back on production, they're going to have some layoffs. But that's the situation. And what you're doing with your case, you're creating pro forma that is forecasted balance sheets and income statements for the coming year to see if they do all this stuff, will it be enough to generate enough cash to pay back the bank? When you construct your pro forma financial statements, the forecasted ones for the coming year, you're going to want to take the following procedure, steps. First, construct the pro forma income statement. Then construct the right-hand side of the balance sheet. Then the last thing you'll do is construct, can't wait to get my surface in so I don't have all this. Construct the left-hand side and cash will be the plug figure. It will be the last thing determined in your spreadsheet. When you look at this and start to apply it, it'll make sense. But what the bank is doing is seeing if the company can pull all this off, they can do what they say they're going to do, will it be enough? And that will be determined by how much cash would be projected a year from now if they do all these things. I know it's not easy to see right now. Once you jump into it and start working with it, I think it'll be clear to you. Now, I don't help with spreadsheets because I collect them and grade them, but I will help. For instance, if you're trying to work this out by hand, I'll be happy to help you with the logic, the steps, and I think you can relate that then to your spreadsheet. I found this particular case turns out to be one of the most useful to students when they get out. I've taught a lot of bank presidents. In my old age, I've taught everybody. But one bank president had me come in and do a little training session for its officers. And that was the case he wanted me to go over. I think you'll learn a lot of useful things from this case. where you get stuck, don't hesitate to contact me. I can't help you with a spreadsheet, but I can help you with the logic, the step that you would follow if you were doing this by hand. It's funny, the preview was supposed to calm you. I think it's scaring you.
One question I had based on our last week's spreadsheet that we just turned in is, do we have to put a cell reference in every single cell that we put an answer into?
Caitlin, the very power of spreadsheets is the ability to play what-if analysis. In a later chapter, your author is going to call that sensitivity analysis. But the key thing is, you want one set of cells with your inputs, and you want everything else to be formulas. Then you can change an input value, and everything recalculates automatically. If we were looking at the spreadsheet where we're looking at profitability and one of our inputs was selling price, you can put in a lower selling price and immediately see how it would affect profits. But in answer to your question, yeah. For the input section, you just put in values, constants. But for everything under the output section, all those spreadsheet cells, I want formulas. That's what makes spreadsheets valuable. That's where their utility comes in.
Okay.
Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's good. All right.
Question, you're going to get a long answer.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
What resources do we have to assist with?
I think you were asking me something and then it sounded like piano chords. Caitlin, was that you?
No, sir, that was somebody else, I think, with the next question.
Because I know we can, I mean, obviously I can work through that. It's Lori. It's Lori. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hey, Lori, you're being addressed by Caitlin, I think.
I was looking to see if there were any resources available to us for Excel assistance because, you know, without being able to use that spreadsheet, the knowledge is kind of not useful for the grade.
How can I put this?
That's my worry.
Yeah. Well, I think you learned a lot from the first spreadsheet, at least about how to structure formulas, right?
I think I'm a little nervous just kind of moving forward with a more complicated case for that reason.
I think you'll find it gets better. And I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't require you to apply these financial analysis problems to spreadsheets. We're doing something very simplistic. I forget which one of you brought this out, but you know, for that bond spreadsheet, we calculated with the spreadsheet the yields on competitor bonds, but if I really wanted to go overboard, I could have had you put in nested logical ifs to determine which of the bonds you then would choose. But even then, you would have to have weighted the importance of the bond rating matching up with the maturity matching up. What you have in front of you, I think, will make sense, and I think it'll be a lot easier for you. But remember, when you start to tackle this, you don't know it at this point, but those 3 steps, there. They're worth their weight in gold to you. You'd be struggling if you tried to do that without using that procedure. Now, when you got into the MBA program, you were supposed to take a spreadsheet proficiency test. And it's amazing how many MBAs work in Excel and know 10 times more about it than I ever will. But it's a useful tool for you, not just for finance. When you get into your grad stat class with Dr. McComb, guess what? Spreadsheets, formulas. When you get into really quite a few of your other MBA classes, you'll be using spreadsheets.
So what resource do I have besides that exam that I took?
Yeah, and that's,
Because
I
that
have to say,
did
you know, we could have had students, we could have required them to take
not help
a course in Excel, but
at all.
we made a trade-off. I can say this,
Dr. Cudd.
TC,
I just want to let her know that there are hundreds of YouTube videos on how to use those formulas in Excel.
Khan Academy or
Khan is a very good one.
okay. TC is one of those
I work
guys.
in healthcare, so I don't use Excel at all.
You haven't been, you will be.
I feel like also if you just Google what your question is, like online, it'll like someone will pop up being like, "Oh, this is how you do it."
Yeah, yeah. The that online inquiry software has gotten so much better. It really has. But Caitlin, in response to your question, I had 12 case teams, 10 of them nailed it. And you do get a mulligan. You get to drop your lowest case spreadsheet score. And I've been teaching this for several semesters. And the issue of the students picking up this Excel enough to handle these cases, it's not been an issue. But TC is the guy to listen to. He works in this stuff. Knows it quite well.
All right. Thank you so much for answering. That does help.
Well, it wasn't much of an answer, but you learn from others. You learned a little bit from this first spreadsheet, actually. All right, guys. That's all the wisdom I have to impart, if you call it wisdom. Any other questions? Did any of you have trouble accessing your spreadsheet or case quiz through the Google Share mechanism? Cool.
No, it was fine.
Well, guys, if you have nothing else, we will adjourn. And I'll see you on the same channel, same time, same station next Monday night. Remember, you again will have a 2-day window to take your individual case quiz. And you know you need to have that case handy, because I don't provide you with everything you need for the quiz. I may change 1 or 2 items with the quiz itself. Oh boy, I'm glad I just thought of this. Something else. You use Moodle when you take a quiz. You use it simply to look at the quiz. You don't enter a thing otherwise. You know, some students have been trying to type in their solution in the little space provided, and that would be great, but I'm going a different route by having you work it by hand, take a pic, send it in. So, and I noticed some of you do both, and I can understand that. I should have made it more clear. You use Moodle to look at the quiz. You don't need to enter anything else in Moodle.
Gotcha.
I appreciate you guys attending. See you in a week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Cudd.
Have a good one, Dr. Cudd.
You too, guys. Figure out how to do this. Dun, dun. Well, I'll stop recording.